What if everything you've been told about staying connected in your later years isn't entirely true? Imagine this, you're 72. It's early morning. The light is soft, stretching through your curtains like a gentle touch. You cradle a warm cup of tea, no phone buzzing, no coffee dates to prepare for. The world is quiet, and it feels good. Not empty, not lonely, just peaceful. For decades, society has wrapped us in a story. That happiness after retirement means being surrounded by people. That the more friends you have, the better your golden years will be. But what if we've been reading the wrong story all along? What if, after 70, the true key to a rich, meaningful life lies not in more connections, but in fewer, in letting go of the noise, the obligations, the small talk, the expectations, and embracing something else entirely, your own peace, your own rhythm, your own self. This isn't about pushing people away or sinking into isolation. It's about stepping into a quieter, more intentional chapter. One where you get to choose how to spend your time, and who, if anyone, gets to share it with you. In this journey, we're going to explore 6 surprising truths about friendships after 70, and they might just flip everything you thought you knew. You'll hear real stories from real people. We'll dive into quiet moments that carry big revelations. And maybe, just maybe, you'll walk away seeing your life and your relationships in a whole new light. So take a deep breath, let go of the shoulds, and come with me into a softer, freer vision of aging. 1. Where happiness isn't measured by how many people you gather, but by how at peace you feel when you're finally, beautifully, alone. Let's begin. First, peace becomes more valuable than socializing. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this: a quiet room, soft sunlight drifting across the floor, the gentle tick of a clock, and the comforting scent of tea steeping in your favorite mug. There's no buzzing phone, no clamor of voices, no urgency to be anywhere but here. That's stillness, that's peace. And after 70, it becomes more valuable than ever. In our younger years, noise was the soundtrack of life. The laughter of parties, the overlapping conversations at family dinners, the buzz of gatherings. It all made us feel alive. Socializing wasn't just a choice, it was an expectation. You were supposed to be busy, connected, involved, and maybe you enjoyed it. But something shifts as the decades pass. Slowly, quietly, peace begins to call your name. Not because you've stopped loving people, not because you've become cold or distant, but because you've discovered something even more fulfilling than company: calm. Friendships, even the beautiful ones, often come with invisible strings. There are birthdays to remember, calls to return, plans to coordinate, energy to extend. For decades, you danced that social dance gracefully. But now, perhaps, it feels less like a joyful waltz and more like a routine that no longer fits. You've earned the right to step off the dance floor. Take Margaret, for example. At 74, she was once the heart of every gathering. Her home was filled with laughter, her calendar packed with lunches, her phone always within reach. But as the years ticked by, the joy started to fade. Some friends called only to complain. Others spoke more than they listened. The stories felt recycled, the sparkle gone. One rainy afternoon, she said no. No to a lunch invitation. No to the guilt that came with it. And yes, to herself. She wrapped her hands around a mug of chamomile tea, sat by the window, and listened to the rain. The silence, once something to fear, felt like a balm. Over time, Margaret began to crave that quiet. She walked slowly through fields glistening with morning dew. She read books that had gathered dust for years. she tended her roses, and she smiled. Not for anyone else, but for herself. Peace became her companion, a presence that asked for nothing, yet gave her everything. This shift doesn't mean withdrawing from life. It means re-entering it on your own terms. Choosing stillness over obligation, choosing solitude, not as an absence, but as a sanctuary. If you've felt that same craving, that whisper inside that longs for less noise and more meaning, listen to it. It's not loneliness, it's clarity. At 70 and beyond, peace isn't a luxury, it's a right. And it might just be the greatest gift you can give yourself. Second, fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. Have you ever opened your heart to someone only to be met with silence? Maybe you made the call, remembered the birthday, showed up when it mattered, and still, when your time of need came, they weren't there. Disappointment in friendship can cut deep, and by the time you reach 70, chances are you've known that sting more than once. There's a truth we rarely speak aloud. Not every friend turns out to be a true one, and sometimes the cost of holding on is greater than the comfort it brings. That's why one of the quiet gifts of aging is this: the permission to let go, to release the friendships that feel like burdens, not blessings. Fewer ties, fewer expectations, and with that, fewer chances to be let down. It's not bitterness, it's wisdom. In our younger years, we gave people second chances. Third, even fourth. We excused forgetfulness. We bent to fit into friendships. We showed up, even when we felt unseen. We feared losing connection. We feared being alone. But now we understand something deeper. Peace isn't found in being surrounded. It's found in being supported. And if someone's presence causes more pain than joy, it's okay to walk away. Take William, for instance. At 78, his life was full of names and numbers. He had old army buddies, neighborhood pals, men he'd known since his factory days. He was the fixer, the helper, the one everyone called when the fence broke or the sink leaked. But when his wife passed away, the silence was deafening. The phone barely rang. Friends offered polite condolences, then vanished back into their lives. The people he had poured himself into didn't pour back. At first, he was hurt, then angry, then still. One evening, sitting on his porch with a glass of bourbon and an ache in his chest, William asked himself, "Why am I grieving people who aren't grieving with me?" That night, something shifted. He stopped reaching out. He stopped waiting for replies that never came. And something beautiful happened. The H began to fade. He didn't grow cold or closed off. He just became intentional. He poured his energy inward, restoring old radios in his garage, tending to his tomatoes with the patience only age can teach, playing Sinatra on vinyl, letting the music fill the gaps others had left. And in the quiet, he found strength. He wasn't abandoned. He was refined. Because here's the thing. When you let go of the friendships that disappoint you, you're not left with emptiness. You're left with clarity. You begin to recognize the difference between companionship and obligation, between love and convenience. At this age, your heart deserves better than conditional affection. It deserves reciprocity, or at the very least, relief. So, if there's a friendship in your life that leaves you more tired than treasured, maybe it's time. Time to step back, to protect your peace, to surround yourself only with people or moments that uplift you. You don't need a full room to feel fulfilled. Sometimes, fewer friendships bring the deepest peace of all. Third, your time becomes more precious. Time is a quiet teacher. When we're young, we treat it like an infinite stream, always flowing, always available. We make plans months ahead, waste hours in idle chatter, stretch ourselves thin because there's always later. But something happens as we grow older. At 70, time stops feeling infinite. It begins to feel sacred. You wake up one morning and realize every hour matters. Every morning light, every quiet evening, every gentle moment of stillness. They're not just passing time. They're treasures. And suddenly, you begin to wonder, am I spending my time wisely? Friendships, even the well-meaning ones, come with demands. Calls that turn into long, draining conversations, obligatory visits, birthdays, anniversaries, social gatherings that you no longer enjoy, but attend anyway because that's what friends do. But here's the truth. You're allowed to say no. You've earned the right to be discerning with your hours. You no longer need to explain why you're not attending the luncheon, why you didn't return that call, why your calendar is open but your heart says, rest. Think of Richard, 82 years old with snow-white hair, sharp eyes, and a quiet laugh that comes like thunder when it finally breaks through. In his younger years, he was the life of the party. His weekends were a blur of invitations, dinner tables, golf games, and gossip. But with time, it all began to feel heavy. He realized most of those conversations were the same: health problems, complaints, recycled stories of glory days. The joy was gone. One Sunday afternoon, stuck at a lunch where the soup was cold and the small talk even colder, Richard had a moment of clarity. He didn't want to be there. Not out of rudeness, not because he disliked the people, but because the hours he was giving away, he wanted back. So he made a decision, one that felt radical and tender all at once. He started saying no, gently, firmly, with kindness, to others and to himself. Instead of lunch with acquaintances, he sat by the river with a fishing rod and his own thoughts. Instead of forced conversation, he filled afternoons with woodworking, painting little birdhouses just for fun. He revisited poetry he hadn't read in 40 years. His days stopped being filled with shoulds and started becoming sacred, chosen. And guess what? He didn't miss the noise. When your time becomes more precious, your standards shift. You no longer want to waste energy on things that don't feed your soul. You begin asking yourself, does this bring me peace? Does it bring me joy? Or am I just doing it out of habit? At this stage in life, your calendar doesn't belong to anyone else. It belongs to you. So if you find yourself pulled into things that drain you, pause. If you're still showing up out of guilt rather than joy, reflect. Time, after all, is the one thing we never get back, and your time, it's golden now. Treat it as such. Fourth, true companionship comes from within. From the moment we're children, we're taught that connection is everything. Go play with others. Don't be alone. You need friends to be happy. It's a message baked into our culture, repeated until it becomes a kind of truth. Happiness comes from other people. But after 70, another truth quietly emerges. One that isn't often spoken, yet holds deep power. The most meaningful companionship you'll ever find may be the one you find in yourself. This doesn't mean turning your back on others. It means finally turning toward the one person who's been with you through every storm, every sunrise, every triumph and fall. You. After decades of rushing to meet others' needs, of tending to relationships, raising families, building careers, you reach a point where the noise settles and you're left with yourself. And here's the surprising part that can be a beautiful thing. Take Alina. She's 76, with soft silver curls and a voice like a warm breeze. For most of her life, she believed fulfillment lived in motion. Lunch dates, group trips, afternoon teas, phone calls that stretched past midnight. She was the glue in her circles, the one who always remembered birthdays, organized events, kept the laughter going. But beneath all that movement, she often felt invisible. She couldn't name the emptiness at first. It wasn't depression. It wasn't sadness. It was more subtle. A sense that no matter how full her days were, she wasn't truly seen. One snowy evening, she canceled dinner plans she didn't want to attend. She poured herself a cup of cocoa, wrapped a blanket around her legs, lit a candle, and picked up a book. Alone. The silence was unfamiliar, but it didn't hurt. It wrapped around her gently, like something sacred. And in that quiet, something bloomed. She began taking solo walks through the park, noticing things she'd missed for years. The soft crunch of leaves underfoot, the patterns of branches overhead, the way sunlight touched the pond. She started journaling, not to be read, but just to hear her own voice again. She let herself be still. Elena wasn't lonely. She was home. We're rarely taught how to befriend ourselves, but aging offers a unique invitation to meet yourself again. Not as a parent, a partner, a provider, or a friend, but simply as you, to reflect, to remember, to forgive, to enjoy your own company. When you do that, something incredible happens. You stop grasping for validation. You stop fearing empty spaces, and the people who do come into your life, they meet a version of you that is grounded, whole, and at peace. You no longer need anyone to make you feel complete, and in that, you become magnetic. So if you've been afraid of being alone, pause. Not all solitude is loneliness. Sometimes it's a homecoming, and the friend you've been searching for, they might just be waiting in the mirror. Fifth, you no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. Remember what it felt like to walk into a room in your 20s. The way your shoulders straightened just a bit. The way you scanned faces, checking for approval. A nod, a smile, anything to say, you belong. Back then, friendships weren't just about connection. They were a kind of scoreboard. Proof that you were liked, valued, worthy. Every invitation, every return text, every shared secret was a subtle reassurance. I matter. You may not have realized it then, but so much of your energy was spent performing. Laughing a little louder, nodding a little more, showing up when you were tired, all to stay in the circle. And that's okay. It's part of growing up, part of figuring out who you are through the reflection of others. But now you're 70, or close, and something profound has happened. Something that sneaks in slowly, like the sunrise. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You've done the work. You've raised the children, built the career, loved deeply, failed boldly, and survived things you never thought you could. You've lived a life. Your life. And now, the need for outside validation. It's faded like a song you once danced to, but no longer need to hear. Take Harold. At 72, he was once a man constantly surrounded by people. Clients, colleagues, golf buddies, dinner guests. His phone never stopped ringing. His weekends were packed. He was Harold from the office, a name people recognized. But when he retired, something unexpected happened. The noise stopped. No more calls. No more invitations. At first, Harold panicked. He stared at his silent phone, drafted texts he never sent, reread old email threads. He wondered, was it me? Was I not enough without the job, without the title? But then, on a crisp autumn morning, he watched the golden leaves tumble past his window and had a realization that felt both painful and freeing. They weren't really calling for me. They were calling for who I was to them. And in that quiet, something beautiful began. Harold picked up his old guitar, untouched since his 20s. He began to walk, slowly, through his neighborhood, noticing birdsong and the crunch of leaves. He stopped smiling out of politeness and started smiling for real, not to be liked, but because he was happy. The more he let go of the need for approval, the more he reclaimed something precious, his own energy. Energy once spent shaping himself for others, now poured into what truly mattered to him. This is one of aging's most underrated gifts, the liberation from performance. You no longer need to post, call, attend, or pretend just to feel valid. You already are. You're not a some A. You're not your friend count. You're not what others think of you. You're a story, written in wrinkles and wisdom, in laughter lines and quiet strength. And the only person whose approval still truly matters is you. So if you find yourself hesitating to let go of a friendship that no longer fits, ask yourself, am I holding on because it feeds my soul, or because I still feel I have something to prove? Because at this age, the only person you ever need to impress is the one looking back in the mirror. Sixth, letting go opens the door to a more fulfilling life. Letting go. It sounds like an ending, doesn't it? Like closing a door, turning out the lights, saying goodbye. But what if, just what if, letting go wasn't about loss at all? What if it was about making space? At 70 and beyond, you've likely carried a lifetime of ties. Some strong, some loose, some frayed but familiar. Friendships born out of history, habit, or a sense of duty. You've shown up. You've kept in touch. You've remembered anniversaries and sent holiday cards, even when your heart wasn't in it. But here's the quiet truth many people discover later in life. When you finally let go of the relationships that no longer serve you, your world doesn't shrink, it expands. Because in that release, you reclaim your time, your energy, your peace, and in that space, new things grow. Take James, 79, a man whose hands are always caked with dirt from his beloved garden. For most of his life, he believed being social was a sign of being alive. He called old friends, arranged meetups, clung to shared memories like a photo album that couldn't close. But over time, the conversations dulled. The laughter felt thin. The same old stories, the same old complaints, the same familiar weight of expectation. He began to ask himself, why am I holding on so tightly? One spring morning, kneeling by his roses, James made a quiet decision. He would stop forcing what no longer fit. He stopped calling friends who never called back. He stopped going to events out of guilt. He stopped stretching himself thin for connections that felt more like chores. And what came next wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. Mornings began with slow sips of coffee and sunlight spilling over terracotta pots. Afternoons were filled with podcasts about history, sketching birds from his backyard, playing soft jazz in the kitchen, while stirring soup just for himself. He laughed more, not louder, but deeper. And in that stillness, James found something he hadn't felt in years: joy. Not the kind of joy that needs to be shared or scheduled, but the kind that rises quietly from within, like steam from a warm cup. Letting go didn't isolate him. It revealed him. His true rhythms, his quiet needs, his sacred space. You see, we hold on because we're afraid that releasing means losing. But life at this stage is not about collecting more. It's about curating, choosing what stays, what feeds your soul, what deserves your precious time. And sometimes, the bravest, kindest thing you can do is cut the rope. Not with anger, not with regret, but with love for yourself. Because on the other side of that letting go is a lighter, fuller, truer life. So if a relationship has become a weight instead of a wing, ask yourself, what would I do with the energy I reclaim? What could I build, enjoy, become if I let go? You might just find that what's waiting for you isn't emptiness, but everything. So, here we are, at the edge of a different kind of truth. The idea that you don't need friends after 70 might sound harsh at first, even unthinkable. After all, isn't connection what keeps us alive? But maybe, just maybe, it's time we rewrote what connection means. Because this isn't about isolation. It's not about shutting people out or hardening your heart. It's about something far more radical: liberation. Liberation from the roles you've always played. Liberation from the shoulds and musts. Liberation from friendships that no longer lift you, only weigh you down. We've walked through 6 truths together. That peace can be more nourishing than chatter, that fewer friendships can mean fewer heartbreaks, that your time is sacred and should be spent intentionally, that you are your best companion, that don't need to prove yourself to anyone, that letting go doesn't mean losing. It means some home to yourself. Let's take a breath here. Because this is not about becoming someone new. It's about finally being who you are. When no one's looking, when no one's asking, when the only voice you hear is your own. Maybe what stirred you today was the image of a quiet morning with no obligations. Or maybe it was the permission, long overdue, to say no without guilt. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the realization that you are not behind, or broken, or lacking just because your phone doesn't ring as often as it used to. You're not fading. You're refining. At this stage, the people who truly matter, they stay. And if no one stays, that's okay too. Because you're no longer chasing belonging. You've become your own home. So ask yourself, what am I still holding on to that no longer serves me? What relationships am I maintaining out of habit, not joy? Where in my life have I confused noise for meaning? This moment, right now, is a chance to choose, to breathe deeper, to walk lighter, to live more honestly. If you've already begun this journey, you know the sweetness I'm talking about. The hush of early morning, the joy of a solo walk, the deep contentment that rises from within. And if you're just starting, that's beautiful too. There's time, there's space, there's you. So here's my invitation. Let go of the pressure to be social. Let go of the guilt for choosing peace. Let go of the fear that alone means unloved. Because what awaits you is not emptiness. It's the most profound kind of fullness. There is a life that belongs to you completely. And that, my friend, is more than enough.